Good morning. Calling the Municipal Services and Properties Committee to order. Today is Monday, April 28th, 2025. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Bishop,
Here.
Star, Gray, here, Casey,
Present.
Kelly, present, Moore, here, Mr. Chairman,
All right, Madam Clerk, can you please excuse the absence of Councilman Starr? All right, thank you. All right, we are here to hear the capital improvement plan for 2025. The legislation that was on the agenda is being held today, so we're going to get right into the capital plan. All right, Director, you want to start us off?
Thank you, Councilman. So we're here today for a discussion about the capital plan. And this is part of a process that you as the chairperson have helped us put into place to have more touch points with City Council before a piece of legislation would come with a list of proposed projects. And before I go through the PowerPoint here, I just wanted to kind of highlight for the council members that this new process includes several meetings that I have had with yourself and with Brooke Saban. And then in those meetings will be, sometimes Chief Tewan, sometimes finance, just different folks to really have more discussions than what you have, you see here at the table. Part of that new process, which this was the second year for, was your office working with council members to get a wish list of projects that would come to us. This year's, so we have a October 31st request for that, which gives us enough time to review and see how we can incorporate those projects into the capital improvement plan. The year before, we worked with you on that list, but it was much later in the year, so this year we had more chance to incorporate those projects. And then even just as recently as last week, we had a meeting just to review this in advance of presenting. So just a snapshot of some of the changes that we're making to try to be more responsive to City Council in this process. So with that, I will start through a PowerPoint presentation that we put together that should give some basics of what the capital improvement plan is and how the selection process works. And then we'll go through the materials that were passed out here at the table. Which includes a list of proposed projects, both for this year and then a proposed 3-year capital improvement plan. I will highlight that on Friday, these materials were both the 1-year capital plan was put in everyone's mailbox, and then via email, additional documents were circulated to Chief Britt for distribution. So the first step here on the capital improvement plan is a nice statement by Chief Tewan that we include each year. The capital improvement plan is essential to the operations of the City of Cleveland and its residents. The plan prioritizes long-term capital projects and commits funds to ensure the city's public facilities, infrastructure, and equipment are sustainable now and in the future. There are certain eligibility criteria that's here on the next slide. And I will highlight that each proposed project does go through the law department or the finance department to our bond counsel to confirm that each project is eligible under these qualifications here. So the 3 basic ways they qualify is new construction, expansion, renovation, or replacement project for an existing facility. And this can include the cost of land engineering, architectural planning, and contract services needed to complete the job. Second is the purchase of major equipment. which would be assets, and those assets have to have useful life of at least 10 years. And the third category is a major maintenance or rehabilitation project. So this would be capital maintenance for an existing facility. And again, that improvement has to have an economic life of at least 10 years. So in capital projects, we mainly deal with 4 bond types. And these are listed here. Facility bonds, which are for our public facilities. And one odd thing just to highlight is that safety equipment, such as the safety equipment that firemen wear, that falls under facilities. Not sure why, but that's just how it's categorized by bond council. Recreation bonds are used for parks and recreation centers. So even though recreation centers might be considered a facility, because it's a recreation facility, it falls under recreation bonds. And then we have road and bridge bonds, which are for roads, bridges, and sidewalks. This could include things like construction services, like inspection services. And then I will highlight that, you know, sometime where a trail falls, it could be under recreation or it could be roads and bridges, depending on if it's outside of the right-of-way or within a particular roadway. That would be how the bond council would determine that. And then we also, there's a special category for cemeteries. So cemetery bonds are for any improvements within the cemeteries. There are other bonds related to, you know, utilities or airports that we're not involved with here, so we're not discussing those today.
Okay, Director, quickly, I don't want to keep interrupting you. Facilities, you said gear, fire department gear. That falls under facilities. And you said bond council has made that determination.
That's correct.
So bond council makes all the determination, is not the standard accounting practices?
Well, it is standard accounting practices, but in my world, we take our list and bond council determines which bucket it falls within. But
Okay.
it would be, you know, under standard accounting
Okay.
practices. Any city would follow the same
Okay, all right,
practice.
go ahead.
Yep. And again, that equipment must have the 10-year useful life.
Okay.
So next is the Cleveland, the CIP selection process. So I'm going to start in the top right-hand corner, and as you can see, the process really does flow into each other because this is a process that we really work on all year round. We look to see what projects may need more funding that was in a previous year, and we also take input from council and others all year round. But where we start is soliciting input from council, and that's through you, Councilman Bishop, as well as individual meetings, and then with each of the departments at City Hall. And what we do is we have a submittal, an intake form, and we take that information and we come up with a proposed list of projects. This year, that list was over $140 million of identified requests. And we then had to prioritize those needs on the basis of several outlined criteria, which is the same criteria that I've presented to City Council in the past years. So the first one is there a safety element of it? Does it need fixed or replaced because of safety or physical condition? You know, we do have facilities that are in greater need of repair due to folks working in them or due to the physical condition of the building. Is there a regulatory compliance issue that requires expenditure of funds? That could be through the EPA or some other entity. Is there a legal compliance role in the request? Are there funding commitments already in line? This comes into play often with our road and bridge projects where we have state funding, NOACA funding, or other funding that's required for a certain year, and that requires our match to be put into the capital improvement plan in that year so we can meet that funding schedule for the third party. And then finally, mayoral and council priorities factor into how we get from $140 million request down to the amount that finance will bond. Next, if you go to the bottom left corner, this list of projects, the full list as well as recommendations based upon these priority, safety, physical condition, regulatory compliance, et cetera. Those are reviewed by the Capital Improvement Plan Committee. That's a committee that is led by Chief Tewin, and the members include Chief Epstein, Director O'Keefe, Director Mersman, myself, and then the Finance Director and his staff. And it's an iterative process. There's a lot of questions that come up. There's a lot of internal to MOCAP cost estimating to make sure that if somebody puts in a request for a certain project that it is the right amount of money to do that project. And so that committee meets several times. And that comes up with a list of projects that eventually is reviewed by Finance Department as a list of projects that both meet the requirements for what we can fund with capital bonds and also fits within the budget for that year's bonding cycle. So this is a map that shows that we really do work hard to make sure that funds are spread throughout the city. It's, how much is invested in each ward each year ebbs and flows based upon needs and requests. But we do, funding is spread throughout the city. And this map shows past expenditures through 2018, but also in the deeper colors, what is requested for this year's funding. And as mentioned, we have handouts of the project list that we'll go through. But this year's request is a total bond expenditure of $75 million. And that is higher than the past couple of years. And that's to accommodate a couple of things, one of which is the $8 million that City Council asked to be put into residential resurfacing. So what we have here is just over $35 million into public facilities being proposed, just over $28 million being proposed for roads and bridges, just over $11 million being proposed for recreation and parks, and then $500,000 being proposed for cemetery bonds.
Chairman, could I get a point?
Councilwoman has a point.
Thank you. I know you mentioned in the funding cycle some of the commitments from NOACA, and I've been educating myself and my residents about the State Issue 2 bond measure that's coming in for more local infrastructure dollars. Mm-hmm. I was wondering if you, to your understanding, the city does not determine where those dollars go when they flow into Cleveland. I think it goes through NOACA. But could you note anything about the interplay between the state bond money that might be coming in and its allocations within the city? Would that affect how we distribute the funds through the chair?
Through the chairman and the councilwoman. So great question. Definitely a program that the city of Cleveland supports. We hope that residents will support it as well. One of the ways that we receive funding through that is through there's a committee called DOPWIC, and they issue what's called Issue 1 funding.
Okay.
And so the money that we apply for the bigger roadway projects that may have a water line involved in it, may have high traffic volumes, those are the types of projects that can flow through and score well. It's a competitive process through the DOPWIC committee.
Can you spell that? I've not heard of that before.
Yes, it's DOPWIC.
Okay.
And if I was quicker, I would remember what that stands for.
And is that, so do you,
You know.
Oh.
It stands for District 1 Public Works Improvement Committee.
Okay, all right, and that's District 1 for ODOT, I'm guessing? Yes.
Yes. It's for that. So,
Public Works Commission, okay.
yep. And that is our committee for our region that competitively scores requests from large communities and small communities to determine how that money is dispersed.
So that is how, when we're voting on State Issue 2 in May, it's the DOPWIC committee that scores and assigns all of the funding from the state bonds that would come into Cleveland. Is that correct?
So through the chairman of the councilwoman, so that relates to road and bridge dollars.
Okay.
And some utility infrastructure as well. That source of funding also goes into the Clean Ohio program.
Okay.
And so there's the Clean Ohio Green Space Program, and there's the Clean Ohio Trails Fund. So that also supports both land conservation and trail projects through a different competitive review committee.
Got it. But in terms of roads, bridges, and utilities, the State Issue 2 bond money would have to flow through DOPWIC and the Ohio Public Works Commission?
Yes.
Through the chair?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me a point, Chairman.
Yep. And we do
All right,
encourage everyone to vote for that.
can we move on with the presentation?
Yes.
Director?
So this, Mr. Chairman, is a slide that shows kind of the comparison of where we've been the last couple of years with bond sales. You can see that the exact amount changes from year to year, but the ratio and the amount of spending in each category is consistent among the years. So just a few highlights. One thing that we added this year that came out of requests from council as well as the Park and Rec Master Plan was what we're calling the Recreation Glow Up Program, which is $500,000 for the next several years to really address capital repairs at recreation centers. So we really believe that focus on some basic things like paint, flooring, lighting will go a long way at our recreation centers. And so that would be a citywide program. We're proposing at $500,000. We did, as I mentioned previously, include the $8 million for roads that council requested during the budget project process, and that is specific for residential resurfacing. And then this year, like past years, we've allocated a substantial amount of money for public vehicles. So that would be both safety, public works, any department that needs vehicles or equipment. And it's $12 million this year. And typically it's 12 to 13 million in the last couple years. But it is something that we're working hard to increase or keep at that level going forward. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer questions, or we can go right into the proposed project list.
Yes. Let me ask a few questions right off the back. On the first page under Public Facilities Director, the Fire Records Management System. Could you touch on that, what that is?
Mr. Chairman, there are certain items that I know a little bit less about, but this one is the #1 priority for the Department of Public Safety for funding, and it's a way that the electronic records are managed. So it's basically a software system that will that needs replaced, and it'll be specific to the Division of Fire.
Okay, so this has a useful life of more than 10 years, correct?
Oh, that's correct.
And this is eligible, based on our bond council's recommendation, this is eligible for that?
Mr. Chairman, this list has not gone to bond council yet, but,
Okay.
but based upon past experience, we believe that it will be approved by bond council.
Okay. So this is going to get, so this 314,000 is going to be, part of the 2025 GEO bonds.
Correct.
Okay, so in 2023, this was also part of the 2023 Public Facility Bond Fund. Do you recall that, Director?
Mr. Chairman, I do have a spreadsheet here that shows, and I did share this with council through Chief Britt, but let's see, 2023, this is a list of the projects that were approved. Mr. Chairman, I do not see it on this list, but it may have been, yeah, I don't see it on my list. So if you have information to help me track it down, I'd be happy to
Okay,
research it.
so can the Finance Director answer that question?
Morning, Mr. Chair.
Morning.
Through the chair to the committee, offhand, I'm not sure if that's the case or not, but we can look into that.
Okay, so nobody can give us, because Director, does that look familiar?
Mr. Chairman, this does not look familiar. I do see handwritten on the top that it says Fire Records Management System, but I don't know that I see that within. Oh, I see it here on the second page, but it does not look familiar to me. No, and I would say that the items that don't relate to capital projects, I would be involved with the setting up of it, but not the expenditure related to it.
Okay.
So I would definitely look into this.
Okay, to the Finance Director, does that look familiar?
To the chair, it does not. I have not seen this before.
Okay, so my question is this: can an item such as the records management system or the RMS, can it be budgeted in 2025, and can it also be budgeted in a prior year before that? Is that something that we can do?
Mr. Chairman, I know that it is something we could do this year. For instance, we're budgeting an additional $1 million for the East 65th Street roof, and we also budgeted for it last year.
Okay, all right. So the total amount of a project, are you sharing with us the total amount of project in the same year that it's budgeted for, or are you giving us a snapshot? Okay, well, it could be budgeted for 2025 $1 million, and then you could see it in 2026 for $1 million, and then you could see it in 2027 for $1 million. So I'm just trying to get some consistency here. How do we do that, Director?
Mr. Chairman, so I think that your staff has come up with a good gotcha for us to investigate with the RMS system, but I can tell you that typically what we do is we work hard with capital projects to do good cost estimating so that we budget for it in 1 year. There has been a past practice, or there was a past practice where we would accumulate funds for a particular project, and typically we try not to do that because we try to expend our funds more quickly than accumulating funds over many years. But as far as the RMS system, that is something that we're going to have to research. I do know that it's a current need with public safety. I've had that conversation with public safety, but I'm not aware of the 2023 funding for it.
Okay. All right. Director, also the East 66 project, if we go to page under, I think this is under, is it Road and Bridges?
Yes, sir.
The
Road
East-
and Bridges.
Yeah, the East 66th Street, Euclid Avenue to Superior Avenue, Complete Green Street Transformation Project.
Yes, sir.
It's $2 million.
2 million of additional dollars, yes.
Okay, and how many dollars was budgeted for this in the prior years?
So previously, Councilman, there was $1 million that was allocated by City Council in the budget process. My recollection was there was an additional $1 million that was allocated through the bonding process, and then this would be the additional $2 million that's needed for the $4 million to carry out the project.
Okay, so this is the final bond dollar amount that we're going to go out for bonds on this project?
Yes, sir. This will almost fill the gap. We were hoping for a federal earmark related to this project. Since the federal government didn't pass a permanent budget, there were no federal earmarks last year. So we will have to either value engineer the project down to the existing budget, or we have been requested to put this forward for a 2025 federal earmark as well, so it's possible that that would be successful. But yes, we expect to go under construction next year, and that's our funding cycle for the project.
Okay, so the typical amount that we bond out is roughly about $60 million. And we're coming in this year at $75 million, okay? You mentioned that part of the increase was for $8 million for the residential street surfacing program that the council lobbied and rallied for. So that would put, but it's an additional, so where are the other additional dollars going for? Why is this so much over our typical bonding amount on a yearly basis?
Sure. So, Mr. Councilman, there was also discussions at City Council table last year related to the funding gateway, and there was the request of council. I was not part of those discussions, but there was a proposal by the administration to fund gateway with $20 million of operating dollars, and the agreement that was made with council was that $10 million would come out of bonds, and so we had to. There was $10 million of projects that were unfunded, so that gateway could be funded, which we had to add into this year's capital improvement plan. So that's an additional $8 million or $10 million on top of the $8 million that I just mentioned about residential resurfacing.
Okay, so if we can talk about gateway, where's the line item for gateway in this on this spreadsheet? Where will we find that at?
So, Mr. Chairman, these are listed as individual projects, not under the name Gateway. Gateway was funded last year, so now we have to replace the funds that were for the projects that money was taken from. So there was $7.5 million for SWAT headquarters.
Okay.
There was $120,000 for the North Marginal Connector. There was $300,000 for a new boat dock, which we have programmed for next year's capital improvement plan, not this year, just due to the nature of that improvement. There was $2 million for turnout gear, which is under facilities, but that's protective gear for the firefighters. And then there was $80,000 of Warren Road safety money, which is no longer needed. The project has been completed, and I've discussed that with Councilman Slife, whose ward that's in. So that money is no longer needed to be reallocated. But that's how we came up with the $10 million.
Okay, now what year was these line items budgeted for? Was that 2024?
Mr. Chairman, these were not all 2024. So the new boat dock, the turnout gear, and the North Marginal Connector was 2024. SWAT was coming to City Council through a separate ordinance. We had conversations with Councilman Plansick and Council President about this project, and since it wasn't in the bond legislation, we were preparing for a separate ordinance related to that. And then the Warren Road Safety Project is older. I'd have to research what year that was funded.
Okay. So I got a question now. Gateway. Can we use bond dollars for Gateway?
Mr. Chairman, again, I was not in those conversations, but bond counsel confirmed that we can. I believe that there is some ownership interest in the property, and that's why we can use capital bonds for Gateway. But again, I was not involved in those conversations.
Okay, can you answer that question?
Yeah,
Brandon?
so to the chair, so before we proposed taking temporarily from these projects and then adding them back into the CIP, we ran all this by bond council, and they signed off that it was allowable. So yes, we are able to do this in a legal context, according to our bond council.
So now, do we own Gateway? Do we own Gateway?
Through the chairman, Councilman, I don't know.
Yeah. To the chair, I don't believe so. No, I believe they're their own entity.
I'm not sure, Mr. Chairman.
So if they are their own entity, can we use GO bonds to finance Gateway?
To the chair, to the committee members, we don't physically own the Gateway complex. However, if there's no team playing at Progressive Field, we have reversion rights, then the city would own Progressive Field. And if there was nobody at the arena, then the county would own the arena. So that's kind of how the deal's structured. But right now, it's basically owned by Gateway, theoretically.
And to the chair, to answer your other question, so we were told by bond counsel, as long as it was a like purpose, we were able to do that swap, which is taking out money from certain projects and then using it for that payment, which was for capital repairs at the arena and the stadium. So that was approved, and that was the actual bond funds, though, are going to be used to fund the project, not specifically the Gateway. So the Gateway funding was taken from existing funds that were in projects. And because it was a like use, we were able to move that over for the capital repairs and pay that out through Gateway. And then now what we're asking is the authorization, or we will come to you with the authorization. My understanding is this is just a presentation, to actually go out for bonding, the authorization to bond to replenish the funding for those projects, which is, an approved item for going out, to the market for bonding.
So when we go out for bonding for a project like Gateway, do we use GO bonds or do we use another type of bond for that?
I don't think we can use GO bonds for that.
So to the chair, every project that we go out and borrow for, we evaluate what kind of tools we can use. Other than GO bonds, we have things called slits, which are subordinate lien income tax bonds, which have a little different rules. So, for specific projects, we go out and these, I believe, we're having reviewed by our bond counsel, make sure we can issue GO bonds for these. So that's our usual process. But for each individual item, we go through and make sure that we have the right tool to issue for, the need, to satisfy the need. So it's really a case-by-case basis. So again, the Gateway was existing project funding that was taken, that was used, because it was a like use. Bond counsel signed off on that, and now we're going to go out for GO to replenish the project. So it's really about going out and borrowing for the projects.
Okay. Okay. We'll get back to that. I'm gonna go to Councilman Brian Casey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, to the Finance Director, just keep it on Gateway real quick. In layman's term, I think that would be called robbing Peter to pay Paul. So if we took money away from projects to give it to another one, now you're asking to go out for more bonds to replenish the money that you took to give to Gateway, that's robbing Peter to pay Paul, correct?
So through the chair to the councilman, I would never
You wouldn't,
rob
but
Peter.
I did. But that's, if you, I understand this is the city and it's government, but if we were doing that in our own personal in our own personal checking accounts, just to get by, that's what we would be doing, right?
So through the chair to the councilman, I guess a better analogy was, if you're talking personal finances, if you were expecting to pay a bill with a certain amount of money and you had another bill come up, then you would pay that.
You would rob Peter to pay Paul. All right, if we could just go over real quick, some of the stuff, we have 3 different lists in front of us, so I'm working on the 25 to 27 CIP proposed project list.
Mr. Chairman and the Councilman, that's fine. That's the 3-year capital
Right,
improvement plan.
right.
And when we're working on that one, just keep in mind that the 26 and 27 projects are not set in stone.
All right. Oh,
Budgets are too high for those years, but it gives you an idea of what our needs are.
Okay.
Yes.
So, City Hall modernization. Mr. Chairman, to the director, can we get a list of the amount of money that has been spent under this current administration on City Hall modernization, how much we have spent, and what those projects have been? Go ahead. Were you going to say something?
Yes, we can.
Okay, all right. The $7 million for this year, what's the West End entrance? Mr. Chairman, to the director.
Mr. Chairman, the Councilman, part of this plan really came together from you encouraging us to look at better accessibility to City Hall. And if you recall, when we came for the ARPA funding related to the exterior project, that you were looking for ADA accessibility from the front door. And through that discussion, we said, hey, maybe it doesn't have to be the front door, but let's come up with a much better plan than everyone coming in the rear door. And so that, in addition to probably a 1.5-year process to really look at City Hall and to fix some of our lower level security related backups, if you will, came up with a plan to not create any new entry points into the building, but to use the lower level doors and the moat in a historically relevant way so that we're not cutting into the moat or any of the walls, to create an entrance that would face the mall. And it would have a canopy, it would allow drop-offs, it would allow ADA accessibility in the most appropriate way through the moat into the lower level of City Hall, which would become an entrance that would be, would allow folks to gather inside City Hall and not queue up in the hallway into the garage as well. That entry point would still remain, I believe. But this would be for security enhancements. It would be the ADA accessibility through that west entrance, as well as improvements in that area for a public meeting space, a coffee shop, and some amenities that will make the building feel more, hospitable and modern.
So, Mr. Chairman, to the director, are you talking the entrance right outside recreation on the basement? That's the west entrance,
Mr.
correct?
Chairman, yes.
All right. And then we don't use the east entrance at all, do we?
So, through the chairman and the councilman, the east entrance is heavily used by the caterers,
Deliveries.
loading, and whatnot. So we do have in here the replacement of the freight elevator, which is needed to, currently it doesn't function, but that would allow folks to bring stuff into the building and not have to go down those steps.
Mr. Chairman, to the director, did you say the freight elevator does not currently work?
Through the chairman, the councilman, so there's a freight elevator that's off the rear drive that goes into the sub-basement, and that one does not work. The the elevators that we have in City Hall that do passengers as well as freight, those obviously work.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. And then just moving down the list, upgrade to District 3 community room and lunch room kitchen. Mr. Chairman, to the director, how old is the 3rd district building?
Through the chairman and the councilman, the district is less than 10 years old.
So have you been, Mr. Chairman, to the director, have you been to the 1st, the 2nd, the 3rd, and the 4th districts just to tour them?
Mr. Chairman and the councilman, I have been in some districts, and I have not been in all of them. And what I would say is that this list of public safety requests was prioritized from first to last by the Department of Public Safety. So they're the ones that called this out as a priority to do.
All right, to Mr. Chairman, I think that, as a committee, maybe we should do a due diligence to tour these police district stations. If they're asking for an upgrade to a building that's not even 10 years old, and we have other buildings, the 1st, the 2nd, the 3rd, and the 4th, that are literally falling apart, right? Maybe we should look at a priority. I understand their priority, but then there's reality, right? It doesn't make much sense if we're going to be upgrading a kitchen, when we have police stations that don't have, heat, they don't have air conditioning, doors are falling off. I know at the 1st district, we can't even use one of the outdoor maintenance door, one of the doors. It's just, that priority needs to, trying to sell us to a kitchen that's, am I aggravating you?
Well, we have a plan for that, and we're coming to City Council with a piece of legislation to rehab all of the police districts.
Okay.
So yeah, we'll be before City Council, whether it's at, in June. We have a plan to handle all of the needs at all of the police districts. So this could be included in that project, but we as the Capital Improvement Plan Committee determined that if public safety is making this one of their top priorities, that it could be funded separately.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, to the
Yeah.
director, then we can just have that conversation with the chief and the safety director. Since you mentioned that, so we're seeing a proposed 25, 26, 27 budget here, and I know 26 and 27 is, more like a wish list. When do you expect the public safety police facilities to be completed then? And that's different, obviously, that's going to have to be different money that gets bonded out. That's not included in this proposed 26 or 27.
Through the chairman and the councilman, that is correct. It's not through bond proceeds. It's through a section of the Ohio Revised Code that allows for improvements to public facilities. I don't have my notes on that program handy, but it will not be bond proceeds. It will be used to carry forth with the police district improvements. Each of the districts will be, buildings will be renovated. Some need different improvements than others, so it could be roofs, it could be doors, it could be bathrooms. HVAC systems and lighting are a key priority of this. And once we go through City Council, there'll be initial improvements that will be underway. I would say, depending on City Council's timing, August, September, October, we'll be starting that program.
You'll be starting the evaluations?
Through the chairman and the councilman, starting the improvements. We're already working on the evaluations, and we're already well into the scope of work so that we can present it to City Council.
Oh, great, okay. And then right under there, it's Police Academy equipment, right? The vest equipment and driving simulator. In 26, you got 300, and 27, you got 150. But on the next page, you have the exact same thing, and it just says 150, 150. I don't know.
Through the chairman and the councilman, so you're speaking of Police Academy.
Equipment to include street vest equipment and driving simulators. And then
Right.
on the next page, you have that exact same thing.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I don't know if that's...
So, Mr. Chairman, it's meant to be an annual program for a few years to get caught up, but it looks like I made an error. I'll have to see if
It's just a
the amount on
typo.
the first page is correct or the amount on the second page is correct.
Okay.
So thank you. Yep.
And then 50/50 sidewalk program, Mr. Chairman, to the director. Council did pass legislation where we could allocate dollars to the 50/50 program, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, just making sure that we can that we can do that.
Yep, and if through the councilman, through the chairman of the councilman, just to highlight for all council members, so we, through the changes we made to the permitting sections of the codified ordinances, it could be city council, it could be a CDC, it could be, you know, a church, and other folks could put in the residents' portion of that 50/50 sidewalk contribution.
All right, great. And then right under that is the TDS, right? I was here and I
Correct.
remember when we passed legislation establishing the TDS program. How, Mr. Chairman, to the director, how many years behind are we in the TDS? Because it was supposed to be 1 year you do the street, the second year you come back and you do the sidewalks. So what year are we in with the sidewalks?
So, Mr. Chairman and the councilman, so we acknowledge that we got really far behind in the tree damage sidewalk program. So what we did is we ended up having to bid it twice, but we bid out what we called a tree damage sidewalk recovery program, which turned out to be an almost $8 million project to catch up. We awarded that project, and it's going to be a 2-year time frame to catch up. It's fully funded. Some dollars came through council through the budgeting process last year. Some came through last year's bond sales. The rest came from last year's bond sales. But it'll be a 2-year program to get caught up. And that's separate than what you have here, which is funding the streets that are currently being done through the tree damage sidewalk program and the residential resurfacing. So as of now, all the old stuff will be in the 2-year recovery program. All the new stuff will be done. Right now, it's still being done the following year. Our goal is to do it in the same year.
All right, and is the capital, if you go further down the page, capital project infrastructure professional services, is that what you were talking about, catching up those dollars?
Through the chairman and the councilman, no, the dollars are already allocated for the tree damage sidewalk recovery program.
Okay.
And if you look at last year's allocation, there was an allocation for, let's see. Let's see. Sorry, my papers got out of order here. Oh yeah, here we go. My papers got out of order. I apologize.
That's all right.
But we did fund the tree damage. Here we go. Tree damage sidewalk recovery program. We put $4 million in last year, and as mentioned, there was additional funding allocated from council in the budgeting process.
And then, Mr. Chairman, to the director, does that mean now, so we have that catch-up program, right? So now we're able to stay caught up, so when a street gets done, we're doing the sidewalks.
Correct. So through the chairman of the councilman, so the challenge is, the challenge with doing it in the same year is that we don't know what streets are going to be selected until that year. And we don't know, based upon the streets, we inspect it, and that tells us how much money we need to do the tree damage sidewalks, because each street's a little bit different. I will say that next year, because there's an additional $8 million that was added to residential resurfacing, you'll see in the 3-year plan, we increase the amount that's needed for tree damage sidewalk, because there's going to be more streets that we're going to have to look at the sidewalks.
Okay. And then my last one is on the last page, street repair program. For 26 and 27, you only have 2.5 million budgeted for street repairs. Is that residential side streets?
Through the chairman, so these are that's not for residential resurfacing. That's for all the other streets out there that don't have any money to resurface.
Like, Mr. Chairman, to the director, like red brick streets?
It could be for red brick streets, it could be for
Okay.
industrial streets, it could be for longer commercial corridors that don't have maybe the traffic volume to, get other funding for it.
Okay. And then I had one more, but I just slipped my mind. It was red bricks. Oh, but the last question, Mr. Chairman, to the director, is there a plan? So we have some both residential and industrial streets that are concrete, which obviously would be overly expensive to replace a concrete street now. But they need either replaced or a lot of repair needs to be done. And it's getting to the point with some of these streets where using asphalt to repair a brick street just isn't cutting it anymore. So, Mr. Chairman, to the director, is there a plan that the city has? I know that in the past, it was discouraged to asphalt over a concrete street. But is there a plan for these streets out there that are concrete that need to be redone, but nobody wants to touch them because they're concrete, but yet they're still full of asphalt patches?
So through the chairman and the councilman, there is no hesitancy to asphalt over concrete streets. It's just a multi-step process where you still have to fix the bad parts of the concrete before you put the good asphalt over it. So we're exploring that in what we do it each year, and we're exploring a few streets right now for this year's season. What I would highlight for you is that there's no reason why through the residential resurfacing program you can't select concrete streets for resurfacing. Not to say that the Division of Streets will do that, but that work would then go over to MOCAP. Now, as you mentioned, it's still a matter of budgeting.
Right.
But if there's a residential concrete street that a council person wants to address, that work could be programmed through MOCAP instead of Division of Streets. That's the same with brick streets as well. It's just something that we would use our contractors to do the work instead of the Division of Streets.
All right, good information. Thank you, Director. Thank you.
All right,
Mr.
thank you,
Chairman.
Councilman Casey. On Councilman Casey's point about the concrete streets, so, Director, do you know how much more expensive it would be to do a street that's concrete to pave over it with the blacktop? Because I do have a street in my ward that's kind of the same way what he just described, and so do you know how much more expensive they are typically than a regular paved street?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have that off
Don't
the
have
top
that
of my
information.
head, but
Okay.
I will say that any council member that has a street that is just in general, you typically, let us know if there's a street that needs addressed. But if it's a particular street that you think is something you'd like to have asphalted over the concrete after the appropriate repairs are made, just flag it in that way for us.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I have a point.
Okay. All right. Councilwoman, you have a point?
Yes, I do. I want to go back to what Councilman Casey brought to your attention.
Could you please talk to the mic, Councilwoman?
Okay, I want to bring up what Councilman Casey just talked about, the tree damage sidewalk. The understanding is that, do your department fund that per se to do the TDS program? Could you elaborate that on a little bit? Versus, I just want to say this, versus what versus that the council can also fund this program and assist with the residents of getting their the TDS program taken care of versus what you do. Could you tell me the difference? Because if we're able to fund it and you're doing it, I don't understand why we're funding it if you're already doing it per se. Could you tell me your steps on your agenda?
Yes. So through the chairman and the councilwoman, the program that's funded by this line item is for the streets that are selected by council members for the residential resurfacing program. So any street that you select, you sit down with the Division of Streets and select a list of streets. The following year, those streets will come through and we'll make sure that if there's any tripping hazards or any sidewalk panels that are popped up by tree roots, we'll fix those as part of this program. A council member may choose to select a street or a block that isn't part of the residential resurfacing program. And that would be a situation where you would choose to put your funds towards a street that hasn't been selected by yourself as part of the residential resurfacing program. So that's the difference between the two. If there are times when a council person wants to do a block or has a resident where, they have mobility issues, and that's something that the council person can fund.
Okay. Now, the TDS program, just want to elaborate. This is the resurfacing that we select all the streets, that's being resurfaced every year.
Correct.
Okay, now the TDS that I'm talking about is separate, so that's two. Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
Yep, and through the
Chair to the to the chief.
Yes,
Okay.
and Chair to the Councilwoman, you are correct. And our tree damage sidewalk program, what we call it when the council person selects it, it's a like program, but it's not exactly what we do because we only do the residential resurfacing streets.
Okay, okay. And second, Chair, to one more question. The 50
Councilwoman, you wanted me to put you on the list?
No, just another point.
Okay.
To what Casey, Councilman
Okay.
Casey,
All
just
right.
another
Thank you.
point. The 50/50 sidewalk program, since you funded that, is that still 50/50 for the homeowner pay 50% and the city pay the other 50, or this is a different type of program than the 50/50 residential program?
Through the chairman, the councilwoman, what you see there is the program that you're speaking of, where the resident pays 50%, the city pays 50%. But as I mentioned to Councilman Casey, there was legislation that went through in the late winter, springtime, that allows a third party to pay the residents 50% if there is a third party that's interested. But this is the line item that you're referencing that handles the 50/50 sidewalk program with the residents.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you. We'll go to Councilwoman Rebecca Marr.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I wanted to just ask briefly about the interplay between the capital improvements that you've listed here and the Parks and Rec Master Plan. So, for instance, I saw that some of the improvements that we know that were also listed in the Parks and Rec Master Plan, like Lonnie Burton Phase 2, is listed here under the bonds. But one of the other top tier recommendations of the Parks and Rec Master Plan was Stella Walsh, both the internal and then the Stella Walsh Park outside where we installed that great play structure with ARPA Back to Basics dollars. But I don't see that listed here within the bond money. So I wanted to ask if we've identified the source of funding for those Stella Walsh improvements through the chair.
Through the chairman and the councilwoman, we have not identified that funding, and we need to do our design and due diligence before we put money into the capital plan for that. So the one nuance here with Lonnie Burton is that that's fully designed, has been fully designed, has been kind of sitting on a shelf waiting for funding. So that's why this one can move forward now, whereas Stella Walsh, we need to engage with you in the community and also, really do a deep dive into the facility itself to figure out what level of, transformation we're looking at.
Okay, I will admit to being a little disappointed at that answer because both of those improvements are listed in the Phase 1, first top tier, biggest priority of the Parks and Rec Master Plan. And the documents you've listed out here are supposed to be the bond improvement allocations through 2027. And if we haven't set aside any funding for that work, what are we saying? That the Phase 1 most important improvements listed in the Parks and Rec Master Plan, we haven't identified the funding sources through 2027? I mean, what's the document even for then?
So through the councilman, through the chairperson and the councilwoman, so there is a line item in here that doesn't get specific where there's $4 million for future park renovations. I should have made it more clear that that's future park and rec improvements. But that's just a placeholder with a chunk of money. And I do acknowledge that that could benefit you and other council members to split that out. But that's how that was put in there. the
Okay,
$4 million.
where's that at?
Yeah.
So, Mr. Chairman, it's the second, if you're on the 3-page or the 3-year CIP.
Yes.
It's the second to the last line at the end of the recreation bonds, and it says future park renovations, locations TBD by master plan analysis, and it's 4 million and $1 million.
Yeah, listed out in the 2026 proposed budget.
Yeah.
But what you and I know is that 4 million doesn't get you very far, and you've identified 5 parks and 5 recreation center improvements. Lonnie Burton's one of them.
Yeah.
And, you know, Clark, like the Clark renovation's already underway, so that's another one of them.
Right.
But I don't get this. We need to break that out. And, if, you know, especially if we're saying through the Parks and Rec Master Plan, we identified priority projects. Okay, let's get those priorities listed in the budget and really scope out what that work is. That needs to have been done already through the chair.
So through the chair, the councilwoman, you are highlighting one of the most frustrating parts about this whole process. We don't have enough money to do through
Yeah.
the bonding process everything we need to do, and a big part of the Park and Rec Master Plan was saying, hey, we got to find other funding streams to come in because at 11 million and some change every year, there's only so much park and rec improvements that we can do with that. So that's why we really have to focus on how do you bring on other sources of funding to supplement the bond proceeds, and also how do you very accurately define or calculate how much money you need for those improvements? And that was the intention of part of this 4 million, to really do the deep dive into, okay, this is what you need, here's some quick wins, but we don't have enough resources in here to do all of that. We just don't, and we also don't want to promise to certain communities that something will for sure happen in that year when it's hard to budget, you know?
Absolutely. And I
Yeah.
guess my only pushback on that is that the Parks and Rec Master Plan was designed to help us prioritize the improvements. It was under the assumption we have too much work to do, we don't have enough money, let's spend some we spent city dollars bringing on consultants, doing this range of investigations and analyses, and sort of saying, where is the best bang for our buck? And we already did that prioritizing, and that prioritizing led to a list of key top tier, here are the top 10 improvements for parks, top 10 improvements for rec, and phasing it out. And we should be using that. That should be the number one thing we're using
Yes.
to identify where the bonds go. And instead, we're chipping away at the money we do have with all of these projects are needed. Nobody wants to be the council person that says, don't improve this fire station and instead put it here, or don't improve this park, instead put it here. But I do think we already did the work of prioritizing, and we have set out a list of what we think are our best bangs for our buck, and we now need that to be reflected in our budgeting document. Otherwise, I honestly don't know what the Parks and Rec Master Plan was for. So I will just close by saying, well, I guess I do briefly want to ask about Warsaw, as I see that listed in here. But Director, Chief, I see you back. We need to talk about the listed identified priorities at Stella Walsh and Stella Walsh Park that we need to translate into allocations sooner than later so that we don't lose that prioritization. In that spirit, I will briefly turn to what was very welcome news in Ward 12, which is the Warsaw Park replacement playground. I do see that in the 2025 proposed capital improvement plan, and then I see it again in the 3-year budget, with the 3-year budget being broken out across all 3 years. I just would like to confirm on the record that the expectation is that Warsaw Park would be replaced in 2025 through the chair.
Through the chairman of the councilman, so you're correct, but let me just highlight for staff. The Parks Capital Maintenance is a program that we do each year, and so we're highlighting what is being proposed. And again, these are not, if a council person doesn't wish to have that done, we can talk about that. This is based upon, our proposal is based upon assessments, but then the future years would have specific projects identified. either, and you know, these projects kind of come from assessments, requests from council, and just, you know, just understanding what the needs are throughout our park system.
Okay, thank you. Of course, I would like we would love a new playground at Warsaw Park. I think that's a great use of investment, and especially paired with the playground or the pool equipment at Warsaw Pool. I think that will really improve the look and feel of that park. So I'm grateful for that, and I'm excited to share that with the community and look forward to getting with you about how we can engage the community and let them know about the improvements coming to Warsaw.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilwoman. I'm going to go next to Councilman Joe Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad to see that we have put in the salt dome for Ward 1. It has been an issue for quite some time. And can you tell me, Director, what are you actually going to do there?
Through the chairman, the councilman, was the question when we would do that?
Yeah, what are you planning on doing at that particular location in terms of repair on Seville Station? I think it's the second page.
Yes, sir. So my team did look at all of the salt domes and worked with a consultant on an assessment of all the salt domes. So my understanding is that the Seville salt dome can be repaired as opposed to replaced. Salt domes to replace, we found out, are, you know, upwards of $2 million to replace. And so I don't know off the top of my head what exact repairs, but we did have a consultant doing an assessment, and Seville could be a replacement and give us all the needs, plus environmental benefits we would need from not letting salt wash away.
Right, and the reason, you probably don't know, let me just tell you, over time, you know, when the shingles come off of those salt domes, in this particular instance is all shingles, and those shingles came loose, and they just started coming off. And had we replaced the shingles, and I don't know how much damage your assessment is going to take a look at that, but I started complaining about that salt dome before I became a council person. And then the intentions of putting the salt dome there at the time, which was almost 27 years ago, was to be able to have a place where you could have a location, because we're the furthest away from everything else from the central part of the city. So then administration of Mike White put that dome in there in addition to adding a parks facility over there as well to help with, instead of carting the equipment, again, from the central portions of the city all the way to the southeast side, to have a location there. Have we took an assessment of the facility that is that's there for park recreation? Because I know that it looks kind of roughed up and beat up. I'm not sure if you have that on your radar.
Through the chairman, the councilman, that's one of the facilities that would be in the next round of assessment. In the last round, we looked at the East 65th Street Public Works facility as well as the car center. And so the next round would be Seville, Stamps, and a couple other, you know, the one in Newburgh Heights that we have a lot of, you know, activity in. So those are the ones that we have not yet analyzed yet.
And then I want to get to, thank you, I want to get to the parks. It's my hope that we can, on our streets and in our parks and recreational facilities, we get upgraded benches. The aesthetics is really important, curb appeal. Several years back, Mr. Chairman, to the director, they removed our garbage containers in certain parts of actually in just about every single location on Lee Road. And I think in part, when it started, we asked for some of them to be removed because they were overflowing constantly, causing issues because there was no one there really collecting and picking it up from the waste collection department. And so they took many of those away. A lot of citizens want to know when those, because I told them I had conversations that we would look to put decorative containers down on the streets, in addition to park bench locations. So again, we have that aesthetic appeal, that approach that this is a city, it's a city where people want to live, stay, want to sit down, all those kind of things of setting that kind of tone. How far away are we with being able to do that?
Through the chairman of the councilman, so those improvements would be part of the Lee Road Improvement Project, which is a transformational project from top to bottom. It will include street furnishings. It'll include, you know, a multi-purpose path. And so that project, you know, we've been working on and towards for quite some time. We probably owe you a meeting just to give you an update, but we're still progressing. We do have a design contract signed now. Cuyahoga County is letting the design for both our side of the project and the Shaker Heights side of the project, so it'll be a uniform look and feel and, you know, in treatments and whatnot throughout the
Want
whole
it to be
corridor.
seamless?
Yeah, it'll be seamless, and in fact, a piece of the Cleveland project will be constructed. It's being proposed as part of the Shaker project, just because it's a natural break in the project. So there'll be the project is both being designed by the county as one project. It may be bid out as two separate projects, but it'll be bid out with the same. You know, the same guidelines, the same design as the two projects. It's just a big one to bid out as one.
I'd like to get together on that as soon as possible, if all, by maybe this week, if it's not too early, next week. And Mr. Chairman, when it comes to, and I know some of the talk, I won't beat this issue up too much, I just need to know the timelines for the sidewalk program. I know that the city has struggled with this particular piece here for quite some time, trying to get some contractors. Can you just somewhat touch on that? And then talk about idealistically, when will this get done? Is it being done in phases? How is this going to be rolled out?
And through the chairman of the councilman, are you inquiring about tree damage sidewalks or the 50/50 sidewalk program?
What was that? I'm sorry.
The 50/50 sidewalk program with residents or the tree damage sidewalk
No,
program?
no. I'm talking about the program where I think we invested I think we have on the books 11 million. I think I heard that for
8 million, yeah.
8 million. So that's the program I'm talking about. The program where, you know, once the street has been resurfaced, then those sidewalks that are problematic sidewalks are replaced.
So through the chairman of the councilman, as I mentioned to Councilman Casey, there's an almost $8 million contract to catch up with the tree damage sidewalk program. So that is all of the old locations, all the past streets that were done that never got the tree damage sidewalk treatment done. Those were combined into one bid document that was put out on the street, and we've awarded that to a contractor. It's a lot of work. It's going to be split between 2 seasons. So I don't know off the top of my head how they're sequencing work. I know they haven't started that yet, but I know that we just are getting through the contracting process, so we'll be able to get a schedule and sort of what their take is on how to best prioritize the work.
I guess I'm trying to get my head around the scope of it, right? So how many streets are we talking about, Mr. Chairman, to the director?
Through the chairman and the councilman, I don't have a list of streets on me, but there's, you know, if you
It doesn't have to,
You know.
Mr. Chairman, be an actual number. What's the
it's a
preliminary
lot of
estimate?
streets. It's a lot. It's a heck of a lot of streets, Councilman. It's Councilman. Through the chairman of
Director,
the
if I didn't
councilman.
like you so much, I'd go hardcore on that one. But you said there's a lot of streets. So how many do we have an idea on? And that's why I guess the next question would be, and we only have, what, 1 or 2 contractors that's doing the work?
Through the chairman of the councilman, so there's one contractor. It'll be split over 2 years, 2 construction seasons, and I can give you an exact list of streets and locations on those streets. We had third-party inspectors go out and inspect all of the streets that never got the sidewalks done. So as you can imagine, if that street was resurfaced 4 years ago, the issues 4 years ago are different than what we have today. Maybe there's new locations, probably not less. And so we went through, and I can give you a list of exactly what those locations are, because that's how we bid out the work. So I have that exact list.
Okay. And then lastly, Mr. Chairman, on the bonds, you talked about the bonds and capital bonds. How far are we in, are we at the ceiling of our usage on an annual year, or what do we look like short-term and long-term in terms of bond use in doing this kind of work?
Yeah, so through the chair to the councilman, so there's different rules for the different tools that I mentioned earlier. We have geo bonds, slits, that sort of thing. So in terms of geo bonds, which is what we usually issue for this, there's a requirement that we stay below 10% of the total assessed value throughout the city. We did just have a reappraisal, which upped that limit. I will say before that, we were at about somewhere between 8.5%, 8.8% of that 10% limit. But in terms of dollar amount, we have, room for the 75 million if we were to issue geo bonds for the full amount.
I see. And Mr. Chairman, to the director, I made a very passionate argument several years back about the fact that we should be using ARPA funds for the city to improve the city's infrastructure. I know that a number of projects need, in fact, you have projects that we don't even have on this paper right here. It's in front of us that's backlogged. And I'm quite sure if we had to go and really take a look at it, it's a thick book of stuff that needs to be done in the city of Cleveland, because we're so woefully behind in the last 20-some years of really fundamentally keeping up with the deterioration of a number of locations in the city. And I could start naming out a few, but I guess my question, Mr. Chairman, to Director, how much money have we spent in terms of ARPA funds on capital improvement projects over the last 3 years?
Through the chairman and the councilman, so the ARPA dollars that were spent on capital improvements were through the Back to Basics program. And so we had $30 million allocated to that program.
Something went wrong. Please try again.
Which that included the basketball courts, and it included the playgrounds, and then it included, I believe, 20 million of roadways spread throughout the wards.
So, and that was pretty much it in terms of ARPA funding so far and capital projects?
Well,
Mr.
there's
Chairman, the director.
through the chairman and the councilman. So ARPA dollars is paying for the roof work that's underway now. It's paying for the facade work, the front doors.
That a part, Mr. Chairman, to the director, is that part of the 30 million?
Through the chairman to the councilman, that is outside of the Back to Basics program. So that was just a separate legislation that came through council. But I could give you, I don't have the dollar amounts off the top of my head for the City Hall infrastructure, but I know it's part of what Councilman Casey requested, so I can provide that to you.
I appreciate that, Mr.
Yep.
Chairman. And Mr. Chairman, thank you to the director. Again, I think that the work that you guys do has been outstanding. I like the fact that in years past, when we started complaining about the leaf pickup program, I remember getting that phone call and then from residents, and then making a phone call to then Bonnie T. went about it. And I really appreciate the fact that the administration pivoted it. We got that we got that back on track. We still have areas that we need to work on to improving that in terms of when we put out notices and tell people to move their cars off, then on that particular day or week, that we go down there and do that versus there being any delays to that. But short of that, I also want to bring up an issue with one of my residents on Fairfax Avenue. I guess the grading of the park, the water is just flowing into their yard and doing damage to their property. And I can give you that information after this session if you could have someone go in and take a look at that. And again, I appreciate the work that you and your and your team does constantly out, year in and year out. And I appreciate that. And I also appreciate your professionalism, Mr. Chairman, to the director. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilman Jones. Is there any other questions, any members on the capital plan? So, Director, and I guess this is, my question is going to be referred to the Finance Director. You mentioned just a minute ago when you said to Councilman Jones, 10% of the total assessed value, and that's the excess value of what? What are we referring to?
To the chair, that's the real estate throughout the city.
10% of the excess value of the real estate? And so our value of our real estate constantly fluctuates. Is that a fair assessment to make?
So to the chair, if you're looking at it from a day-to-day basis, that's correct. But my understanding is that, there's a report published every year that gives us an exact number. It should come from the property appraiser, from the county. That actually gives us that dollar amount, and then we base what we can borrow off of that, 10% or whatever that number is.
So you currently mentioned we're around 8% of the total excess value. We're borrowing around 8% of the total assessed value of the city's real estate. Is that what you mentioned just a little while ago?
So to the chair, that would be outstanding debt, which we also pay down when we make our debt service payments. So we're also paying principal down with those debt service payments. So that number should come down. That number, that little over 8% that I mentioned, is based on the old property values. Obviously there was a reassessment in 2024, which raised the limit on that. But I've yet to see that number, that official number that we base the 10% off.
Okay. All right. And to the finance chief, we had a change in this SLIT and GO bonds generated interest policy. Is that correct? Do you want to talk about that? Do we have a change in that policy?
To the chair, historically, the city had allocated interest based on cash balances in each purpose, which made some sense. However, we talked to bond counsel this late last year, early this year, to determine that we could allocate interest to what purpose we want in that year versus equally allocating it. So if there's a bigger need in public facilities, we can allocate more interest to public facilities versus other purposes, as long as it's in that same year and has to still be used for projects. But it doesn't have to be equally distributed like we did historically.
Okay, can we get a copy of those from bond counsel, that change from bond counsel? Can we get a copy of that?
So to the chair, that was actually distributed upon request from staff, city council staff. So they should be in possession of that, but we can send that out again if needed.
Okay. Also, can we get a request that from bond counsel authorizing the use of bond dollars for Gateway also? Can we get that request?
To the chair, we can definitely ask about that. But again, I just want to emphasize we're not asking for bond dollars and going out to borrow specifically to fund Gateway. The transaction was the swap from existing funds and projects that got moved, that actually got used to make the Gateway payment. But the money that we would go out and borrow for would be for these specific projects on the CIP.
Okay.
And to the chair, we did talk about this with bond counsel last year. We can get something in writing from them. I don't know if we did this, but it was determined last year, and unless this has changed, and I'm not aware of this, is we cannot spend bond money specifically at the Gateway complex. That's why we did this swap. Now what we're doing, some of these projects that we're now funding with bond money was actually funded out of the general fund, or they were funded out of 10-400, which is the revenue recovery fund, because we could not legally give Gateway / the Guardians and the Cavs GO bond money. So we swapped it out when we did the swap. Now we're tolling these projects with bond money. We'll get it from we'll get something from bond council in writing, but right now I don't think we can use GO bond money at that complex.
Right.
That's why we did that swap late fall, and council approved the swap to actually navigate that requirement.
Okay. All right. So I understand. I understand that just a little bit, but it's still we're trying to get a little bit more clarification on that proposed swap. So the supplemental. The $15 million and the $5 million from ARPA that we did last year for Gateway. Can you talk about that to the controller?
Yeah, to the chair, $5 million came out of 10-400.
Okay.
Which was the $5 million minority business credit, which we're going to be coming back to council with supplemental to put that money back. It's not in part of this because it can't be capital, but we have a plan to bring something in May to council to restore that project at $5 million. $10 million was funded out of, 10 million of 15 million came out of the general fund. We took 5 directly out of the general fund, and there was a $10 million swap. So some of those capital projects that we had in the general fund for the last couple of years during the supplementals at the end of the year, we were able to then swap, GO bonds to do those projects. And freeing up the general fund, and now this is the actual putting in the GO bonds to actually fund those projects again.
Okay. All right. So you mentioned just a while ago that historically what we did when we generated interest, we used that interest to, we could use that interest to fund other similar projects. But now that is, excuse me, now that's not the case, right?
Through the chair, we're still using it. We have to still use it to fund projects. That's required.
Okay.
So we are using it to fund projects. Historically, we had allocated it based on purpose. So like we did a percentage of roadway, facilities, cemeteries, et cetera, by the cash balance. But it was determined by bond council. We didn't have to allocate it that way. We still have to allocate it to a purpose and spend it on a capital project. It just does not have to be uniformly allocated like the city had done historically. So if we have a bigger need in facilities versus cemeteries or a different need, we can allocate money to different purposes, but it's still got to be spent in capital.
Okay. So another question I have, we have interest that we have gotten from our bond proceeds, correct?
Through the chair, yes.
And so and we have interest accumulated over past years. And what do we do with that interest money that we get from our bond proceeds over past years that we haven't spent?
Through the chair to the councilperson, when there's a need, we will allocate it. So if something comes up through council, the administration, we will allocate, accrued interest for those projects.
Okay, so if we have, let's say like $10 million or $13 million in interest over that we have unspent, why won't we use that interest on projects that we have like in 2025? Why won't we use that interest for projects so we won't have to go out for to sell other bonds?
Yeah, so to the chair, that is a great question, and that's something that we're looking at. We're looking at all the money that's currently sitting in projects. We're looking at interest to see. So this $75 million that we're asking for, we see as a maximum. We are going to look at other possible funding sources to see if we can kind of lower what we actually issue in terms of bonds. But that $75 million, we look at it as a maximum, and we are doing that research to see how we can make things more efficient with our borrowing program, so we're not quite borrowing as much. And that's something, in the coming weeks, coming months, we'll be bringing to council and having a discussion about.
On the point, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Councilman Jones, you have a point.
I know that there are certain limitations of how funds are to be used. One example I wanted to bring to the table, we had some discussion on this to quite an extent last year, was taking ARPA funds. I think we took 10 million of it and we gave it to the Cleveland Foundation so that the program that they wanted to put in, Mr. Chairman, to the director could last in perpetuity. And so is there some kind of way in which, you know, you guys are the experts, the mathematicians in accounting, that we could somehow do something similar to that? Where we could have projects, because we know every year how much our streets program costs. So it seems to me that we should be making our money work for us. And is there some kind of investments that we could be putting, high-end yielding investments that we could be putting our funds in so that we could create a program that could operate in perpetuity?
Yeah, so through the chair to the councilman, another great question. So those funds are invested. We're very limited in what we can invest them in based on bond covenants and that sort of thing, because we can't take in the proceeds and then, you know, put them into risky investments and then not be able to make our debt service payments. And then we also have spending requirements on the funds that we bring in. So the short answer to your question is those funds are invested, but we have to invest them conservatively based on bond covenants and, you know, rules for our operating portfolio.
Yeah, and I understand that. Could we, you know, like in the case of the foundation, could we utilize some kind of a system like that? It doesn't seem like that's risky at all, Mr. Chairman, to our director.
Through the chair of the council person, I think the Cleveland Foundation has the recycling, like it recycles. So like they spend money on something, then people may pay them back. Unfortunately for like our roadways, once we spend it, it's gone. So we don't have that same type of comeback on that, unfortunately. But I think like whatever the Cleveland Foundation, you know, they get money back from people as they do these items, or they get additional donations to try to keep that fund whole. And they also don't have as stringent investment regulations that the city has, so they're able to gain a little bit more on their interest than the city can right now legally by the state of Ohio and by our ordinances as well.
And Mr. Chairman, that's why when I'm sitting here at the table, and for an example, we had a piece of legislation in front of us where to make a decision or to work out a compromise, we were able to receive, I think it was $130,000, give or take, maybe even $150,000. But we decided to plow it back into, or at least we didn't plow it back into. This was a project that was being worked on in Garfield for Metro Parks. And I felt, Mr. Chairman, that if we picked up all of that kind of money and put it and parked it somewhere, we would have a significant amount of money, Mr. Chairman, so that we could do a lot of these works and sustain. One of the things I think is important to us is infrastructure in the city of Cleveland. People are concerned about their sidewalks. They are concerned about their streets and what it looks like. And so when I sit here at the table and I see us give up $150,000 to a system that's already wealthy and getting plenty of money from the state, I felt that as being the poorest city in the nation, one of them, we should have saved that. We should have saved every penny and nickel that we can into an account that could help us to deal with our own deterioration. And there's no park, Mr. Chairman, when the question was asked to the director, have we spent $10 million in it? So we have a park authority around us having the capacity and ability to govern itself in such a way where it has that kind of investment power. And the city of Cleveland has not invested in the last 30 years $10 million in a park, according to the director. And so I would suggest, Mr. Chairman, whenever we get an opportunity to reserve dollars and cents for our citizens, we should keep every penny. We shouldn't be giving out not one penny nowhere else if we can keep it here. We should take care of Clevelanders first. And so I think that that's important. And I know that this is not the forum to deal with that issue. That issue was way back then, but it's to say, hey, whenever we get an opportunity, let's park those funds that we are able to get and bring in, because we're asking our citizens awfully to do a lot. And we have asked them to do that now for over the last 25 years. And so whatever little relief we get, we should take advantage, Mr. Chairman, and I yield. Appreciate you.
All right, thank you, Councilman Jones. Another question to the director. The bond funds for 2024 wasn't received until October 2024, and the 2024 projects got set up in 2025. So what is the urgency for us to go out for 2025 bonds if we haven't received the 2024 bond funding, and we just received the 2024 bond funding just a few months back?
Yeah, so to the chair, another great question. So again, this is a presentation based on the maximum that we may need to fund projects. We're going to look at what our spend down was over the last year, and then also what we have readily available to kind of lower that number if we can, and then only borrow for what we actually need to borrow for these projects. So these are things that are currently under review by the finance department, because obviously we don't want to go out and borrow for funds that we don't need. So I'll just say that that's something that's ongoing, something I've tasked my team with, doing a thorough review of how much money we have in projects, what is the timing of borrowing versus when do we need to borrow, to make, that's when I mentioned efficiency. That's something that I think there's room for improvement and something that we're looking at, and really one of my big priorities this year as the new CFO.
Okay. All right, Director, and I look forward to having that sit down with you and a meeting with you about talking about how we can be more efficient with our bond dollars and all of this interest that we have on the books right now, how we can utilize that so we won't have to keep borrowing. Is there any other questions for the committee before we adjourn? Director, I really appreciate you with this in thorough, in-depth 2024 CIP plan. Everything was very crisp and easy to understand. You got any comments?
Just to say that, I think this year we had more input and collaboration with City Council, so hopefully that will make this process a little bit smoother, instead of surprising folks. We do have to follow this up with the legislation. Our goal, big picture, is to maybe even do this earlier next year, because the goal is to line up getting the funds with your construction season a little bit better. Last year was an anomaly. It was pretty late. But I just appreciate everyone's attention and good questions here today.
Okay. And I want to thank Mr. Gentile. I want to also thank Chief Tealwyn for her efforts in this. And I also want to thank Ms. Keisha Chambers also. Again, is there any other question before we adjourn? All right. I hereby adjourn the MSP committee to the next call of the chair.